welcome leaders back to the Innovative Leader Podcast. Hi, David. How are you?
I'm well. How are you, Christy?
Awesome. It's great. We're in the middle of May. There's a lot of things going on here in the U.S. with shifts in vaccines and masks and whatnot. Lots of moving parts, and things continue to be very busy for leaders. So today, the topic that we wanted to dig into is, regardless where you're at, whether you're thinking about starting a business, whether you're building a business and have a team, whether you are a director or a VP in a team or organization, or whether you're at the top of the organization, leadership at all levels requires people to understand, how do you set people up for success? And sometimes you'll hear those words thrown around. How do you, set people up for success? But what does that really mean? And so today we would like to look at, what does it mean to set people up for success? And what are some pitfalls that can get in the way? What happens when we don't set people up for success? How does that accidentally happen when we didn't even mean for it to happen? Versus what can you do instead so that you do set people up for success, and then ultimately we really get the results that we're desiring. So David, when you think about this topic, setting people up for success, what have you noticed is in the top reasons why people don't get set up for success? What are some of the ways that this accidentally doesn't happen?
You don't, when you as a leader don't provide a clear vision and clear expectations, then everything gets blurred. So I think there's a lot of clarity that has to go on when you're trying to when you're trying to figure out what your role is in a position. And you can't do your job. You can't do it effectively. And that's a result of the leadership above you not really clarifying what your role is. I mean, I run across people all the time who are, and even myself in previous positions, it's like, okay, so what am I supposed to do? You've given me these tasks, you've given me these roles, you've given all of this, but none of that really is kind of fits what I am, who I am, and even the job description that I was hired under, and all of these things that have been, expected of me. So give me some clarity about what I'm supposed to do, and clarity about how I'm supposed to lead my team if I'm leading a team. I think we run into great problems when there is when things are foggy and not clear about what our role is, and how we can lead the people below us, and how we can function in that environment. I think that's really one of the biggest things. You just don't know what your responsibility is. I mean, I've been in situations where I was hired to be a programmer, but they started throwing other responsibilities on me. Okay, I don't mind that, but that wasn't necessarily my role. If you're going to expand my role, then there are expectations I have of you, such as expanding my salary and other things, but also bringing clarity to that. Is this a permanently defined parts of my job? And if so, then I'm going to have to make an investment over there. So you just got to bring clarity to that. Otherwise, the people downstream are not going to be able to function properly.
Yeah, you said a lot of really good things. I think number one, you started with vision. We had a podcast last week about vision, and that whole piece of it, which is a very interesting topic with vision. A lot of times people think that they're putting out a vision, and I believe part of vision is a certain level of how. And sometimes there is this resistance because you don't want to micromanage and say, this is how to do your job. So that's not really what you're saying. Like, tell me how to do my job. Tell me what time should I get here and what should I do first? That's not what you're saying, right? We're not saying the how of the day-to-day transactional element. But in vision is included something that really is the philosophy of how we work. And typically that is in the values of an organization. So if you have your vision of this is what we desire to achieve and to accomplish, our values tell us how we work and the priorities for that organization. And so when you understand those pieces, it kind of goes into this definition of, okay, so David, you're in charge of this new product launch, and what your role is XYZ. It's a philosophy or a high level. It is a how. Like sometimes I used to say, no, it's not a how, but it is a how. It's a type of philosophy of how we work, how we're going to implement that vision. So I think that's one piece that's really good, vision and values and that philosophy. And then I think another piece that you mentioned, and for sure, I'm really big on a lot of times when leaders are, things are kicked off, not defining rules, because rules essentially allow us to know our swim lanes. And it's not that we are rigid or inflexible. Right now, we need to be more organic and more flexible than ever before. So we're not laying concrete swim lanes. It's not like that. They're floaty swim lanes that are very dynamic and moving.
They're bumper guards.
Yeah, exactly. It's kind of bumper guard-y because you want to be flexible. You want to be organic. And so, but that definition still to understand what is this swim lane? What am I doing versus what is this person doing is a key piece to setting people up for success. Otherwise, we accidentally cross swim lanes. Right. I'm making decisions that you should be making, or you're not making decisions that you need to make that now affect me doing my part of the job, or whatever it is. Yeah. So if those definitions aren't made, a lot of times it creates conflict down the way, and we all don't like conflict. So let's just set up for success at the beginning. And then the last piece that I thought you mentioned with definition was really good. And you got a little bit into expanding. And I think there's an interesting piece of change management that we really need to look at as leaders. And that change management used to be a much more structured system. So we are set up like this. And now, David, we're adding more to your role. So we might have gone through a mini change management structure in order to properly roll that out. What is changing? Why is it changing? What are the ramifications and implications of that, et cetera, right? So then this is change management. But in our 4.0 world, change management has to be even more organic than ever before because things are like constantly changing. But it doesn't mean we just go, we don't do change management. You do change management in a faster continuum.
Yeah, when you think about that, if you're expecting your employees to adjust and adapt, which in this world we have to adjust and adapt, then at least make it clear that that's what's going on. If they ask me to do something, I'm okay, but is this a one-time thing or is this an ongoing thing? Because then I start to look at processes and systems. Do I need to change that? Do I need to tweak that? How am I going to set all of this up? And that's an investment in time and resources that could be used on something else. So now you've got time management things, you've got project management things that are going on. So change management has to happen. It just has to happen faster, and there needs to be clarity within it. Don't give me something so broad that spreads me so thin and expect me to do it all well. Right. If you want me to do this, then I've got to make an investment. And if you're not going to let me make that investment, then don't ask me to do it. So I think that's really good thought processes, that if we're going to do change management, then we've got to be clear about it and have conversations about it.
So that's good. So let's get into our first point. So those are some ways that we accidentally don't set people up for success. Right. So kind of building on what we've just been talking about is the opposite of having a clear role and a defined goal. So if we have a clear role and a defined goal, and to your point, what you were just saying with change management, like, does it mean I need to change all of these things, or it just means this piece or whatever it is? How do you find, let's just talk fundamentally for a minute. How do you clarify a role and define the goal? How do you make sure that that is clear?
Well, I think you have to. So for me, the person, you set the goals based on the person that is doing them. I think you've got to have goals organizational wide. You've got to have roles that are organizational wide, those kinds of things. But within that framework, you've got to set that person up for success by not asking them to do something they're not capable of doing. So I think you have to know that person, and then from that level of relationship, and also by using assessment pieces, those kinds of things, so where you have an understanding of who that person is and their strengths. Then you sit down and you have a conversation. This is your role. This is what I expect you to do. I don't expect you to do this over here. I do expect you to engage in these stakeholders and be clear about that. And then you define it, and then try to stay away from all that line that is in almost every employment agreement: other duties as assigned. Right. Because that just sets people up for failure. I'm not going to lie. That just sets people up for failure. So it's for me, it's getting to know the person, knowing their strengths, and whether that's just relational or assessments or a combination of both, and then setting out some clear and defined roles, some clear and defined goals. We expect you to do X, Y, and Z. We expect you to spend time engaging these other stakeholders. This is part of your responsibility, and don't worry about those things over there. I'll handle those, or we'll get somebody else to handle those. So that's how I kind of approach that process. And then when it's clear, and not only that, not only do you communicate to the person, you have to communicate to everybody, so that you're not getting, me as that employee, I'm not getting calls from 6 different people asking me to do 6 different things, none of which are part of my role.
Right.
And so that's got to be communicated throughout. This is their role. This is what they do. If you want them to do, if we need somebody to do something else, you come to me, and then we'll figure out who's the right person to get that to.
Yeah, I totally agree. I like what you said about when you're defining the role, that not only are defining what they are doing, but you're also, because sometimes there's things that overlap a little bit. So you're defining what they're also not doing. So you are doing this part, you're not doing this part. This belongs to so-and-so. So I think that's helpful sometimes when you take your role and this is what you have versus here's who you're working with. This is who touches your box. This is who touches your box. This is who shares your box. Whatever it is, that you're kind of defining the who's and the related swim lanes as well, I think can be good. I think also within defining the roles, there's a piece around your authority and your checks and balances. Some people, especially in our world today where we're more naturally self-empowered, people can be quickly offended when they feel like it was their swim lane and then all of a sudden they needed approval or they needed 2 quotes or whatever it is. Because I think sometimes if you can define what those standards are or what that level of authority is, we have approval to spend up to $5,000 in your department. When you go over that, you're going to need to have quotes, your proposal, and it needs to be submitted to whoever, right?
And that often happens when leadership changes, right?
Right.
And so there's got to be clarity about that as that thing happens. Again, that's proper change management.
Totally, exactly. The other thing that I think that is interesting is, and it's kind of in the neuroscience of having people repeat back what they heard. It never ceases to amaze me, communication in words and how you can feel like you communicated very clearly, but then it wasn't actually clear at all. Because when they, sorry, I'm getting a pop-up. So it wasn't clear at all. And that when they repeat it back, it's actually very different than what you thought you said. So I think it's an interesting process to write it have a conversation about it, and then have the person repeat back, what do they think it is? And then to your other point about the team, huge. Like, what good does it do if just the president of the company and the VP had this secret divine conversation, but nobody else knows that? That isn't helpful. So you have your agreement among your leaders around what that conversation is. And then that president would share that with the organization. We're welcoming so-and-so. We're really glad to have them here. They have competency in these areas. We're excited for them to be adding value in these areas. This is the way that you'll be working with them. Do you have questions? What are you hearing? What are you understanding?
Right.
So people have questions, they repeat back. That person has repeated back. That type of a thing, I think, is a big deal. And then the other really quick thing is sometimes the leader doesn't actually follow the rules that they set up for the leader. Like, everybody else should go ask the leader that question, but the president who hired this leader is not doing that. So you have to walk the talk. So you need to go talk to that person if you're going to make a change in this department as well, because that's their swim lane.
Yep. No, absolutely agree. I think, yeah, absolutely agree. I think that last point you made is so huge because, again, there's something about just having doing what you say you're going to do, doing what you expect other people to do. And when you don't do that, then that opens the door for everybody else to come flooding in and changing how things, function. So yeah, absolutely. That's huge.
So second point in setting someone up for success, first, you want to clarify their role and define the goal. Second, we want to remove obstacles. What do you see as keys to removing obstacles when you're setting leaders and team people up for success? What does that really mean to remove obstacles?
Yeah. So I think there are a couple of things in that. You out of that clarifying piece, you don't you block anybody who tries to get something done that's outside of that clarifying role and that clarifying goal. I think you run interference when those things happen because you want those people to come to you and not to these other persons or other people who that's not their role. So I think you run interference. And then I think you start redirecting people to the proper person based on those clarifying roles and goals. So I think you run interference in that regard. I think you take off of that person certain responsibilities so that they can just do their job. For instance, one of the things that I do with my teams is I just ask other people. I ask our sales reps, you come to me. If you have questions, you come to me. If you have issues, and I just try to let my team accomplish the tasks that that have been assigned to them. And so that's a kind of another way to handle that you take the pressure, you take the questions, you handle those situations in a probably, as I think about it, is really the same thing I said for the first piece. You take all of that and just let them do their job. I do all the reporting. I send reporting. I send email. I send updates. I do all of this stuff just so my team doesn't have to be bothered with it. I think that's another aspect of removing obstacles. Then you think you have teams, you have things like resources. One obstacle to getting things done is not having the resources to do them. So part of your responsibility is to remove the obstacle of not having the resources. And maybe we could really just say you provide them the resources that they need.
Right.
But often that really is a big deal when you don't have the resources, you don't have the training, you don't have the whatever resources you need to get the job done. Then as a leader, you've got to you've got to figure out how to get that so they can do their job.
Right. Yeah, I
So,
agree. I think resources are a big deal. And a lot of times people who, wherever you are in that food chain, whoever you are as a leader, whoever you're empowering and set up for success, you have more resources than they do. You have access to more resources than they
right.
do. So just in fact, the fact that you are setting someone else up for success, the fact that you can, that is part of setting them up for success is what support do they need? What resources do they need? And providing those things for them. Yeah, I agree with that. I think a couple other things that I would add to that list, which is good that you said, but a few more things that I'd add is number one is removing ambiguity. You kind of mentioned that in the first point.
Clarity. Yep.
But I feel like sometimes there can be ambiguity in the vision or the goals or different things going on. And as a leader, that's something that I like to use the analogy of the helicopter, the motorcycle, and the trench. And let's say that the leader, you're in the helicopter and you're empowering someone who's in the motorcycle that's overseeing the trench. So you have not only do you have resources, but you have a different purview, a different perspective to see what is going on in different trenches, that you have to let that motorcycle rider, that trench leader, know what's going on, so that if you have a VP over a division or whatever it is, there's still a motorcycle rider over that trench. Yep. And so by you helping to clear up any ambiguity, or if they're talking to you and they're one-to-one and they have a lack of clarity about something, by you helping them to understand the clarity or sensing, okay, it sounds like you might be doing this. Wait a minute, I know that George over here in this department has also started working on that. Are you guys talking? That is a role of a leader to reduce conflict, to reduce overlap, to reduce things that, the front doesn't know what the back is doing. That all is a level of ambiguity. And that type of a thing. I think related to that is also issues, anticipating issues. Have you talked to George? It sounds like you guys are pretty far down the road. You're getting into technology stuff. Have you guys talked to George in technology? And are you guys on the same page? Have you looped them in yet? That's the job of a leader, to make sure that you're removing obstacles, because you see that coming up down the road, that they're going to get ahead of themselves and they just forgot, because they were so deep in their implementation, they forgot about including these other pieces. And to me, when I think about removing obstacles as a leader, you're always seeing that big picture and helping them to see what they might run into: a conflict, a lack of definition, a lack of resources, whatever. And you're helping to make sure that that path stays clear so they can keep moving.
No, yeah, that's really good. I particularly like the one about the ambiguity. And seeing things from a different perspective, and then being able to keep somebody from walking down a path that maybe they shouldn't be walking because it's already being done by somebody else. I think that's huge. The overlapping of things, that's so frustrating when you're in the trenches and you're doing that overlap is just, it's demoralizing.
Right.
And so, that whole perspective of being elevated and seeing the whole picture, that's huge. Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so let's do the third point. The third point is having their back. So you set your team up, or your leaders up, or your people up for success when you clarify the role, define the goal. Number two, remove obstacles. And then number three, have their back. What are ways that we as leaders accidentally do not have somebody's back, or how do you make sure that you are having somebody's back?
So in terms of empowering them to make decisions, empowering them to do the things that are part of their role and goal, I think that's and when somebody comes back at them or comes to you, it gets escalated to you. He has the power to do this. That's his role. He can do that and he can make that decision. And if it's a bad decision, then we'll talk about it. But you don't go crushing my dude or crushing my gal because you think something is wrong. If that's the case, then you come talk to me we'll figure out if they actually had that responsibility, if the decision was not right. Again, that we'll sit down and talk about it, but you can't throw people under the bus. That is one of the most demoralizing things you could ever do for a team. When internally you start blaming other people, and without even knowing what's going on, I think that's huge. And I've seen that. In fact, with a previous boss, I was on a call, and I got thrown under the bus by sales. And the reality is that we had not even touched that client, and they were throwing us under the bus. And the two bosses, my boss and then his boss, were both on the call and said nothing. And that's one of the most demoralizing things that can happen when you're in the trenches. So you've got to have their back. You've got to have the responsibility to have their back. If that's not been given to you, then that's another problem. But you've got to have that responsibility to have their back, to stand up for them, to stand to when people are criticizing them, just to really set the boundaries in which those kinds of things can happen. And then you got to applaud them when they do the right thing. That is an example of having somebody's back. And then I don't know, maybe we talk a little bit about resources here as well, that if you're going to have somebody's back, then you're going to give them what they need to be able to do the job. So I think, those are just a couple of ideas when I think about having somebody's back.
Yeah, that's great. I especially agree with all of them, but the last point, because I think one of the common ways that sometimes leaders accidentally don't have their back is you set someone up essentially to look stupid or to make a bad choice because they didn't have all the information, versus when you make sure that you are communicating the information, that person has the resources and really largely the information that they need to do their job well. Maybe there's a big meeting coming up or a big decision coming up, and this person didn't realize that. But if they knew, oh, we have a board of directors meeting coming up at the beginning of May, we're going to be making some big decisions on this, or even just they're going to be on campus. Sometimes there's different things where people are like, I didn't even know.
Right.
And so their department is a bit of a mess, or people are on vacation or whatever it is, right? Make sure your leaders have the information, is really having their back so that they're not scrambling, but they're able to perform to the highest level. I think another thing, and you kind of mentioned this too, but in knowing their strengths and having this one-to-one, it's really important. It's not that once you're all in leadership, you don't need one-to-ones anymore. Right. Like you've graduated out from mentoring something. One-to-ones are about information and about connection and communication. And so when you understand the strengths, and you mentioned, I don't remember which word you use, but the word that I use is champion, that when you are championing someone, so maybe you're in a meeting and someone's like, well, I don't really know if tech has this or not. You're able to actually champion them to say, I know that they have this covered. So-and-so is very good at this, and I know that they have that covered. That is a big deal, to champion someone's credibility, to champion their strengths, to champion what you see them doing. So you don't even have to be defensive, like, oh, I don't think they did that. You don't have to be in a tug of war. You can just be champion who they are. Right. And then if there are conflicts, I like how you also had said too, if there is something wrong, don't throw them under the bus. Say, you know what, it sounds like we need to have a conversation. It sounds like all the information is on the table. It sounds like we need to look into this. Let's get the right people around the table. I can't speak to that. So-and-so is working on this. Let's bring them in and figure that out. I'm sure they want to be part of the conversation.
Yeah, no, absolutely. We run into this all the time in business, where the holder of the information doesn't share it. Yeah. And that puts their team, their downriver team in a big hole, and it creates some problems. And so having that's huge. Having your back, for a leader to have your back and give you everything and not forget or not tell you,
Right.
that's huge. Um, that's why I have a team meeting every Friday morning. That's why every time I get an update, I not only tell my team, I tell all the stakeholders, and let them know that this is coming, this is about to happen, this is the way things are going to change, this is the way things are going to work, so that they're prepared. Because I would hate to be in the field talking to a customer or talking to a client and saying, oh, this is how it works, and then get to an implementation call or an integration call, or get to, those pieces,
Right.
and be told, no, it doesn't work that way. And it makes them look like a fool.
Right. Right.
And
Absolutely.
so I think you've got to do that. I think that's a huge part of having somebody's back.
Yeah. Yeah. There's so many things. And then when those are happening, that person can be more successful because they have the information. They feel
Right.
supported. They feel uplifted. They don't have unnecessary obstacles in their way, and they know what they're doing, and they can do what they need to do.
Absolutely. And they're empowered. Yeah. Like I said, they're empowered to do that. And,
Yeah.
and it builds their, it builds their character. It builds their competency,
Right.
and it builds their own marketability.
Right. Right.
And when somebody feels that way in an organization, they are more productive. They work harder. They love their job. And so when you can do that and applaud them, that was the word I used. Use champion. I use applaud. When you do that, then why would you get somebody who's going to be there for a while?
Right. Well, and they're confident. They're more
Right.
confident to make choices because they know they're back. Yeah, there's so many significant things.
Exactly. Yeah. And you want to stay in a place where you feel you've got everything you need to be successful.
Right.
And,
totally. Yeah.
And when that doesn't happen, then that's when you have people who start looking, transitioning, finding something else. And that's a huge deal. I mean, what you don't want to have happen is the internal leadership, the people who have the ability to grow and be leaders. You don't want them leaving because you're not doing what you need as a leader.
Right.
And that's, that's big. So anyway, yeah.
Yeah, no, I agree. On one hand, it seems so simple and so easy. And on the other hand, obviously, we don't always do that as leaders, which is our own job to look inside and to be, why am I holding on to this information? How do I need to be seen? What's happening with my ego that I'm not wanting to share this information? What's going on? That's a whole nother thing to look at. Why would you not do these things? They're so simple, but yet there's things inside of us that cause us sometimes to not do them, but it's worth reflection.
It is.
So,
absolutely.
All right. Well, leaders, thanks for joining us again today. And if you have comments or thoughts about how somebody has set you up for success, what did they do? What was something in your past? Or maybe you've done something to set a team member up for success that was really significant and really made a difference. Put those in the comments. We'd love to hear.
Absolutely. And yeah, exactly. We'd love to hear those comments. And also, if you're not subscribed to the podcast, make sure you do so at YouTube or Apple or anywhere you get your podcast. We appreciate all of your listens, and just love to hear your feedback. So anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Thanks. Have a great week.
Have a great weekend. Take care.
Bye.
Mark, bye.